Welcome to the Orykl Podcast, where we ask the big question: Hey, universe, what's going on? I'm your host, Huenu Solsona, and today we are exploring another fascinating spiritual journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. It's Huenu here, and this is Orykl's podcast. Hey, universe, what's going on? Thank you for being here. Today, I am chatting with Beau Waterman. Beau and I have been friends, I guess, for a little while because he's one of Orykl's vetted practitioners. He is a very talented channeler and a spiritual coach, and it's wonderful to have him here. Welcome, Beau.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and a joy to be here.
Thank you. Beau, maybe we can just start with a little introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at the moment.
Yeah, so I became a seeker, you could say, about 12 years ago, and that's led me in an extraordinary path where I've learned a lot more about myself and and many different ways, like spiritual and physical, all of the above. And through that journey, I became a channeler and also a life transformation coach. And so the way that I help people is one, I do provide one-to-one channel guidance sessions worldwide virtually. And that allows people just to create deeper clarity about situations in their life. And people tend to come and ask questions about situations that feel pretty big in their lives so that they can really connect with that inner clarity. So I see channeling as a guide deeper into yourself to the clarity that exists so that you can connect with the clarity. And that's really cool. This phrase kind of came about the other day as I was doing some fine tuning in my materials, so that you can connect with that inner truth, that inner knowing without doubt. And so that's what I love, is that so many of us, we have a sense of what might be the real answer for us, but then there's that doubt. Like a lot of us have learned to doubt it, and there's no judgment in that. There's no like right or wrong in that. It's just somehow we've learned to doubt our own deepest truth. And what I love about channeling is it can guide us to that truth and help us to like really see it without doubt. So that's what I love about that. And then also as a life transformation coach, I help people that want to transform their lives for the better. And sometimes, it looks like I help people with coping mechanisms or tendencies like perfectionism and people pleasing, or people that have like a really low sense of self-worth. I help those people restore the relationship they're having with themselves, because the life that we're having choice by choice, and that's how we create our lives, is through choices. It really is, what I've seen, our life experience is a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. And so I help people get in there and see what's going on and see if they want to make shifts with that, so that as they shift how they feel about themselves, as a person, as a soul, that then they can show up in their life in a different way, make more empowered, aligned choices. And with that, like a new kind of life begins to manifest and come forth. I've seen it for myself. And so, and it's an ongoing process. It's not like you're ever done. You're always like, okay, what am I creating now? What am I creating now? What
Yeah.
kind of life am I creating? Uh, when you can do that in an empowered way, then the life becomes more enjoyable. And so I love helping people create a more enjoyable life for themselves.
Okay, I'm back. We're gonna have to edit that. I was gone there for a little bit. Okay, that's great, but I just missed the last little bit. Um, okay, Beau, that's wait. Okay, wonderful. Beau, I'd love to share your story, your spiritual story. Maybe let's take it back to when you were a child. Would you say that you were a pretty sensitive child? Did you see things maybe that others didn't? Were you a little different, or was your childhood a pretty normal, standard one?
I do have a very specific memory of being sensitive in the way that I would just feel things, and they were just strong feelings, and I didn't know why, but I felt them. And I also remember that I would share like, hey, like this is what I feel about like this person. And this is like 6, I was told not to trust that. And so I actually doubted it. I began to doubt it. I remained sensitive. However, I did also begin to just like doubt what was unique about me, if that makes sense. And it wasn't until much later that I really began to see it as a gift and begin to trust it again. However, what I will say is that how that served me throughout my life, because I continue to have it, like in my childhood and my teenage years, where people were trying to tell me things about life and how life works, what happens after death and all that. And what would happen is just inside it would be like, no, this is not right. This is what I'm being told is not right. And I did learn to trust that. I learned to trust when people would tell me things that did not feel right. I'd just be like, no, I can't get on board because something in me is like, not no bueno.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, I get it. And it's very interesting because a lot of the people that I deal with who are spiritual practitioners have had the similar experience, whereas childs, they were very empathetic and slowly they began not trusting themselves because of what people would say, and maybe they were a little different, and then they shut it down. But ultimately, it wants to come out, right? So
Mhm.
what was that point for you, that catalyst that you realized that you had something more that, or let's just say what, I don't know if you've had this, but a lot of people have sort of a catalyst to the beginning of their real spiritual existence, where sometimes it's something traumatic, or maybe it's just you kind of reached the end of your tether, or what was it for you that really shifted you into a more spiritual way of living?
Yeah, so it's essentially the point I arrived at that 10 to 12 years ago when I mentioned before becoming a seeker. So that was at the end of my 20s. And I was very unhappy. I was pretty depressed. I actually got to a point where my mind was coming up with like a lot of worst case scenarios, just like fears and whatnot, to the point where I was having panic attacks. And when I started having the panic attacks, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, is this what life is? I was like, this cannot be what life is supposed to be. I was like, there's got to be more than like my mind scared me to the point that my body like stops breathing. And I was worrying a lot. I was just like, so my main thing was, I can't keep living with a mind like this. Like this mind is like stressing me out like 24/7. And so I began just to I had the yearning of like there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And the life I built in my 20s just wasn't working. Again, I mean, I built that life as a people pleaser, and it was a life that didn't feel like me. It was trying to maintain expectations for a lot of other people. Like, look, am I doing okay? Am I doing okay? And that life was not enjoyable. It didn't feel like me at all. And so I realized that as I was about to turn 30, I said to myself, my 30s cannot be like my 20s. Like, I just can't let them be the same. And so, yeah, I did really began to allow those deep questions in me to drive me into, just like looking for other people that had the same questions I had, throughout history, like even in like the 1300s. And I began to find people that were asking the same questions and sharing the wisdom that their life led them to based on that yearning, those deep questions. And the wisdom they shared really resonated with me. It was like, yeah, like something in my heart says, yes, yes, this is real. And so, yeah, it was me wanting to basically come back to myself. It's not even reinvent myself, it was coming back to the real me that I realized is what needed to happen as I was about to turn 30. And that was the catalyst that really, I was like, okay, it's time for a new life and the real me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I think for a lot of people, sometimes that happens a little later in life, where, because your 20s are so busy and you are working and maybe, partying or whatever you might be doing in your 20s, and your 30s, you kind of get to like really work. I mean, I just looking at some of the experiences around me, friends around me, but it's towards the 40s that a lot of people go, hey, wait a minute, is this it, right? Everybody has a different journey. But I think whether it's in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, I don't know if I don't want to say I don't know what percentage it would be, but a lot of people get to that point where they go, wait a minute, is this it? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Isn't there more? I mean, this seems like it's not right. And like you said, there is something in all of us, right, that knows that or feels like something is true or right. And it's that intuition. And it's whether you follow that, right, or whether you ignore it and continue to people please and do what society says, or if you, take the time to say, wait a minute, let me listen to myself here. I think I know the truth already. It's like discovering yourself, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so it happened for you in your late 20s. And so what happened throughout your 30s?
I really did lean in and listen to that intuition, that inner knowing, and I did allow the life I had built in my 20s to fall away, like everything, including a marriage I had been with. Uh, I've been with my husband overall at the time, for 8 years. We were married for 5 of those 8 years. So yeah, that naturally just dissolved because it was very clear that we were both on different paths, and he also wanted me to be happy, and he could tell that I wasn't happy in that life. And he knew that I had a dream to go to California, Los Angeles, California, and study acting. And so he just was like, look, if that's your dream, go do it. And he told me like not to look back and just to go. And so I was like, okay. And so that was kind of the main thing I was concerned about. So kind of having that conversation, I just let everything else go that I had, built up in my 20s. And it was definitely, a leap of faith. It took a lot of courage because I had never lived anywhere else. Like I was still kind of living pretty close to my hometown. And I was on the opposite coast, like 2,600 miles away. But I did do it. There's a lot of emotions. It took a lot of courage, a lot of faith, and I did do it. And yeah, once I got there, I was like just freshly 30 when I got there. And what was great is that, Los Angeles is a city full of artists, people that are also listening to their intuition, that also took a leap of faith, because a lot of people aren't from Los Angeles. They come from all over the US, all over the world, to like follow that intuition, to follow a dream. And so just having that kind of community, like that kind of understanding, and these were other people that were also, because a lot of artists are very contemplative, like deeply inward looking people. So they're also, looking for the true meaning in life. And they also have a yearning for those answers. And so that's where I discovered the field of metaphysics. And once I discovered it, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is everything for me. It's like everything I want to know about, like the deeper side of life, the invisible side of life, all of those types of things. And so I really began to dig in terms of the field of metaphysics. And then also I was studying as an actor, and in the field of acting, at least I feel like this is probably a pretty common thing. It was definitely an encouraged thing in the school I was going to, and it was to get to know yourself. They said one of the greatest statements throughout all of history, especially for an actor, is know thyself. And so they encouraged us to like, look inward, to journal, to ask questions like, why am I like this? Like, why is this behavior the way it is? And so with, metaphysics on one hand, which is, also a lot about getting to know yourself and like your soul self. And then the acting, acting was really about like understanding humanity, because, in acting, you're learning how to play all different kinds of personality types. So acting was very much like, okay, like understand your humanity. So it was really cool how I had like metaphysics, the invisible side of our life, the soul side of life, and then acting, which was like understand your humanity. And I just kept going deeper and deeper with both of them. And both of them just allowed me to like just discover things about life that were really exciting, about myself, about all of humanity, about who we are, amongst the stars. And yeah, it keeps going. I mean, it's 10 years later and it just keeps going. So it's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah, it does keep going. It is never ending, like you said. Okay, so from there to you being, let's call it a professional channeler, you do this for a living, you channel for people. What happened from then till today?
Yeah. I well, here's the thing. I mean, I guess some of these things are already there. It's just a matter of do we recognize them, right? So I would say about 5 years ago is when other people, like close friends at the time, helped me see that I had this gift, to be able to like, channel wisdom from my soul. Because it's not like anything outside, it's coming from deep within. And we all have that same wisdom deep within. It's just, to me, it's how good are we at focusing in a way that we can just hear that wisdom in an uninterrupted way, if that makes sense. And so I hear that wisdom in my heart. And then, my brain just kind of translates the energy that's I feel in my heart. And so I feel that we definitely all have that capacity. It's just, again, like how good are we at connecting with the wisdom in a way where like we can hear it clearly, then also deliver it. And it just, it took a lot of like me clearing out just, a lot of healing work, deep inner healing type work so that I could really hear that in an uninterrupted way. And that was probably about like 5 years ago where I had friends that were like, hey, like this is a thing for you. But even before that, there was many moments where I would just be having because I'm a Scorpio, so like I like to have deep conversations. Like going deep is just like normal for me. And in those conversations, I would just kind of say I would say the most obvious thing for me to say, and people would be like that is the exact perfect thing I needed to hear right now. Like, how did you know that I needed? I was like, well, it was the most obvious thing for me to say. So it was happening before someone kind of like some friends were like, hey, like, you can channel. And yeah, you look back like, okay, it was there. I just didn't really connect the dots. And so yeah, but when I really connected the dots was probably about 5 years ago. And like anything, I just kept taking steps, learned about it more, learned about other people that were doing it in a professional way. Uh, in the beginning, I just, offered sessions to friends, and right off the bat, people were like, "Oh my gosh, like, like this is really helpful. You have no idea." So I was like, "Okay, I'll keep going."
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is so helpful. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of actually I remember our first conversation was so lovely. We were just talking, and next thing I knew, you were giving me this incredible coaching. It was kind of like a coaching, and then you also went into channeling. But I remember that conversation because we actually met for something else, and it was one of my best really coaching sessions. Yeah, it was really beautiful and wonderful, and I was very impressed. So yeah, how does this help people? Like you say, people go, wow, it's amazing. Maybe you can give an example, but what is the benefits of people? What do they get from these sessions?
The first that comes to mind is, I'll make the statement simple to start, and then I'll kind of expand from there. Essentially, it really is coming back to our power, stepping into our power. What I've noticed about human beings, because again, so many of us in Western cultures, cultures that have heavy Western influences or themes, because I can't speak for the entire world. Like I don't know what it's like to be in an indigenous community. I just don't. I've learned some things online, but again, I don't really know what a normal life is like for them. I just know like Western culture because that's what I've always been in. And in Western culture, we just doubt ourselves. Like we doubt that inner knowing. because of all the conditioning, like the societal conditioning. There's from a young age, like this is who you need to be. These are the things that are true about you. Like this is your background, this is your culture. And it's kind of like those are the expectations. And you like, trust that, but a lot of that stuff, it's they're just ideas, they're just concepts. They're not really us. Like who we are is that soul intelligence that's, if you will, here exploring. We have a lot of options as a human being, and so we're here exploring. And it's so because so many of us had that dominant influence from culture and society growing up, we do trust that because it's what we know. And we also find that a lot of that just doesn't serve us. It doesn't lead to, a lot of the times, I'm not going to make a blank statement, but a lot of times it leads us to just chapters in our lives where like, no, this isn't a fit. Like this isn't me. It doesn't feel right. And then there is that inner knowing that's like, hey, like this is the better choice for you. It could be moving on from a relationship that just hasn't been a fit for a while. It could be starting to date again, but you just have a lot of stories that tell you why you shouldn't, or it's not appropriate. Again, a lot of these, so, you societal stories. So it's a lot of times we're just holding ourselves back from what feels right and true, what feels aligned in terms of life choices, like actually living life and living life in a way that feels in harmony with the truth of who we are. And there's all these stories that just stop us. Like, you can't, it's not appropriate. What will other people think? What if it doesn't work out? What if you're not special? What if you don't have what it takes? There's all these stories that just stop us because we've just kind of memorized them. And so what I've found over the years that I've been doing this is that in a channeled session, it really is my soul coming to the forefront to invite the other person to really connect with their soul in a way that they really hear it without the stories, coming in. And sometimes the stories do. However, because and it's an allowing thing, the other person, the client has to allow themselves to really go deep and connect with their soul as well. And I find that it pretty much always happens that the person does allow, because there's an energy shift in these sessions. Like I shift my energy, and it gives the other person an opportunity to shift their energy. And again, I would say like pretty much all the time, people do allow themselves to shift and go deeper into that soul wisdom. And once they're there and connected in that way, they just feel the truth. They just feel it. And sometimes they might express a doubt that pops up in their mental awareness, but then my soul will be like, okay, but is that story, is that block, is that limitation really true? And then they usually feel back into their knowing. They're like, no, that's not true. That's just something that's stopping me. It's just a block. It's just a story. So they can really begin to see what's true and what's not true.
Yeah.
And when they're really connected to what's true, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I get it. It's, I'm stopping myself, or I'm doubting myself, or I don't believe, or I don't trust. And when you all of a sudden you realize that, then it's like your opportunity becomes clear. Okay, there's an option to not stop myself. There's an option to not get in my own way. There's an option to trust. There's an option to believe. There's an option to see myself in a better way. It's those shifts that are really meaningful for me to see people have, but then also on the other side, what I just see a lot of is smiles. Like people are just like, oh, I get it. Or like I see it now, or I see why it hasn't been working, or I see why this thing showed up in my life to teach me something. They just like, they all of a sudden get it. And when the people get it, it's like this relief of like pressure and resistance and doubt and confusion. And when people are able to release that pressure for themselves, because I'm not doing it for them, they're doing it for themselves. And when they release the pressure, the doubt, the confusion, all of a sudden they're just like, and I just love to see them go and just like relax and breathe again.
Yeah, I do know, and I love it. And it's one of the reasons I really love this kind of work, what we call the spiritual counseling or the channeling is really empowering people to find their own solutions, but showing them how, right? Because we hear
Yeah.
that a lot, but how do you do it? And so you do need a guide sometimes to gently show you the way. And it's a very compassionate, it's a very loving space. I know from feedback that a lot of people feel like seen for the first time. They feel heard. It's yeah, especially with channeling, I find it is so supportive, that environment, that people can allow themselves to even like trust themselves, that even their own thoughts and feelings, somebody is saying, hey, that is valid, it's true, and then they go, oh, and I always knew that, I just, thank you, and then that relaxing and just falling into themselves. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And I always say that, the idea is that people empower themselves and don't need somebody else, eventually. But it's nice to have somebody to help you along the way. So I love what you do. And yeah, we are gonna wrap it up soon. Is there any advice that you would have for people out there in terms of trusting themselves, and listening to that intuition?
Hmm. Yeah, one of the biggest things I love to point out, and I'm speaking from my experience because, I only know what it's like to be me. However, I do find that people tend to relate to this offering of wisdom, if you will. It seems like other people can connect with it when I offer it. And it's that what I've found throughout my life is that, that intuitive wisdom, that light that really guides me to the best possible next step, or the next step forward, or the choice that just feels best or most aligned. Like that voice for me is usually in my heart or in my gut, somewhere in between. It's in my body, kind of like in the core of my body. And that voice is simple, straight to the point. It doesn't bounce around, it doesn't change its mind. It's essentially like, this is the next step, end of sentence, straight to the point, clear, doesn't mess around. Whereas the head, can like be like, what about this? What about that? No, you shouldn't do this for that reason. No, that's, it's like it's all over the place. It can change its mind in 6 seconds later. It's just like, monkey mind, like they say. And so that's the distinction I look for. I'm like, is this monkey mind or is this clarity?
Yeah.
And it's the clarity that I always aim to arrive upon. Sometimes it takes some practice to calm this down, to soothe my body, so I can chill out and actually, like, because I'm a feeling person, so I just feel what's true for me as an energy. My mind can interpret what the energy is saying. So sometimes it can take a little bit of practice to really, okay, I want the clarity and not the confusion. And so that's what I would pass on. Is it, if it feels like all over the place and confusion, I would imagine it's, chances are that's the mind, that's, all the conditioning, the different angles of conditioning kind of like showing themselves. And the truth for me is, again, it's just so straightforward and so clear. And that's, I don't like to move forward until I have that answer. I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, now I can move forward. So
I love
if
it.
if you can relate to that at all, that's what I found to have worked best for me. Is I just wait until I'm at the clear, simple, straightforward, just feels best answer.
Mm. Yes, great advice. I love it. You did remind me of something you told me a while ago also, especially when making a decision, you're not sure where to go, is to just sit still and think about the one option and try and see how it makes you feel. And if it makes you feel I like that word that you use, expansive, it's a good sign. And if it makes you feel constrictive, it's
Mm.
the other way, because sometimes decisions are not necessarily good or bad. I mean, they're both good and both bad. So how do you know? Well, just I've used that before, believe it or not. Like, do I feel like, even your body tends to me, do I feel like, huh? Or do I feel like And you either go one way or the other, right? So it's a good little tip that you gave me a while back. Um, so Beau, any parting words? You obviously offer these sessions to people. They can find you through Orykl. And yeah, anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I would just offer, if you have a big if you have a big curiosity about life and you just feel that there's more, you know that there's more, that's there for a reason. There is a lot more, so much more than I ever heard growing up or read about in books. Because, a lot of these books just come from societal norms, if you will, as well. And what I've seen with my actual eyes, in the past 10 years, just goes way beyond anything I ever read about in a book or anything people told me about in my hometown. Just like things where I'm just like, holy cow, there is so much going on. We're like barely just touching the surface of what life actually is and all that's going on in the universe. So if you have that inkling, I would say it's there for a reason. And it most likely wants to take you on an adventure where you can see with your own eyes more of what's going on that hasn't really been written about in books, so to say. So if it's there, I would say probably wants to take you on an adventure. And so it's up to you on whether you want to lean in.
Absolutely. I love it. I completely agree with you. All right, Beau. Well, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being on Orykl. Thank you for doing what you do, helping so many people. And yeah, we will see each other soon. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.